Hello out there. This is Wise Women, and today you're spending time with women inspiring spiritual excellence. I'm La Cherie.
I'm Agnes.
And I'm Treve.
We are a group of women who love God and we love His people, and
We
we just want to share Him with you. All right. Hello, everyone. And today we're still continuing our series on culture versus kingdom. We have a very special guest with us today, a good friend that we love, and she's so darling to us. Myra, say hello.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Hi, Treve.
Hi, Myra.
All right. So we're going to continue with culture versus kingdom. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic because we're going to discuss race and God. And what we want to talk about is how do you not see the color of the person and you see Christ in the person? Culture tells us what you see is what you get. But God and his kingdom way of doing things tells us that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. So, how about I always like to open up with a little story perspective. So, for me, several years ago, I was at the Dollar Tree and I went in there to grab, we were just moving back to Texas and I needed a floor rug because they were tracking in dirt and I didn't want to go spend a lot of money. So I was just going to go to the dollar store, get a little small one, in and out in 5 minutes. But the lady in front of me had like 50 some odd items. And this is right around New Year's Eve time. So it was like December 30th. And she had all this stuff. And so they're ringing it up. And they ring it up and it's like 59 da 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 da. And she can't find her wallet and she is freaking out. And she's looking in her basket and she's asking her kids and she calls home and I'm just waiting patiently, which is grace, and finds out her wallet is there. And so she's telling the lady, okay, I'm going to put all this stuff back, but I'll come and get it because I need this for my kids. And I go, well, don't worry about it. I'll just pay for it because you already have it bagged and that's just ridiculous. And so I pull out my card to pay for it and she goes, you don't have to do this. I'm like, I know. I go, but it's just so much easier because then you can go and then I can go because I'm literally getting one thing. And I go, so put all her stuff with my one rug, which makes it now $60. And, I can get out of here. And like the whole store, just like people were going crazy. Like that was like they couldn't believe that someone was paying for somebody else's stuff. And then I was just sitting here thinking like, how am I going to tell my husband I spent $60 at Dollar Tree, but I only have one item? Like I'm going to come home and, it's just going to be like, where's the rest of the stuff, And the lady that was ringing the cashier at the other register literally came over and hugged me. The woman that I was paying for her stuff was like, well, I'm getting these things for my kids because they were, I don't know if she was Norwegian, Swedish, something, but there's this tradition where they hide little things for the kids on New Year's Eve, and whoever it is leaves these weird trinkets for the kids. And so it's like some of it was candy, some of it was toys, and that's what she was purchasing for. And long story short, she took my name and number, said, I'll pay you back. I just literally left my wallet at home. I'm like, literally, it's no big deal, no big thing, because I just believe that whenever I go somewhere, I should leave a place better than I found it. I said, and if I would have left you here feeling like you couldn't have gotten this for your kids, I would have felt bad. And, it wasn't like it was $600. It's no big deal. And she's like, no, I'll pay you back. She hugs me. And again, people in the store just coming over and they're like, oh my gosh, you're just so sweet. And I think it may have been more of a color thing because I'm a woman of color and this lady wasn't. And to them, it was like, that doesn't happen. Usually someone turns their nose up at someone who doesn't have their money to pay as opposed to offering to pay. And long story short, she came to my house the other night. Not only did she pay me back, she and I are friends even now. We've had dinner together. When our stuff did arrive for the move, her husband came over and helped us unpack boxes. Wonderful woman of God. God just made a divine connection on that day. But the world saw something they didn't expect to see. They didn't expect to see one person showing empathy towards another person in a particular situation. They didn't see it for what it was supposed to be. a God thing, where God was showing love to someone who just forgot her wallet that day. They saw through the world's eyes of this doesn't happen. And, that kind of is sad for me. So, Myra, we were talking in the car over here. Is there, you were sharing some things with me.
Well, I'm trying to think back, but one thing that we were talking about was my parents being very strong Christians. We never labeled people, ever. I grew up having just as much respect for any other human being as I felt like people had toward us as Christians. Later on, I found out that that wasn't necessarily a balanced thing. And, when you grow up like that, but then you see something totally different from yourself, not something, but someone totally different from yourself, it kind of brings up fear in a way, because if you don't have any personal relationships with people who look different than you do, you just don't know. And in ignorance, there is fear. So we were talking about, I went for a book launch at La Cherie and Trevay's church. And I told her, I said I was scared, I was intimidated. I felt like people weren't going to like me because I was different. And I left there more educated because I saw all these women just being women and connecting. And we all love the Lord. And I don't know, it was just surprising. And some of the women there were looking at themselves in a mirror, because we did an exercise about what do you see and what does God see. And the self-doubt that came up in a lot of women, where from my perspective, I'm looking at them thinking, you're beautiful. You've got it all together. Why are you doubting that? That's not the way God sees you. But yet, with myself, I look in the mirror and I find all the flaws that humans see, not God. And it was very eye-opening. It made me feel more comfortable. But I think I also had a feeling of what a person of color feels when they're surrounded by all the white people, and it's like, it's got to be intimidating, especially with our history as not just a nation, but a world where people were lorded over and treated differently. And it makes me ashamed of my whiteness sometimes, because it's like, how could one human being treat another human being like that? But it's still going on. But yet it's cross culture now. There are just bad people in the world.
Right.
And it's a broken world, and there's sin, and sin causes people to justify their actions, which, is never right. Because if we're looking to God as our guide, we're not going to be thinking about the things that we shouldn't do. We're going to be thinking about the things that we should do.
Right.
So, Trevay.
Wow. So something that I have realized is that we're all a part of the human race. But being human is not a race. And being human is actually what causes us to have flaws and to make mistakes and to operate in the flesh. And for me, I think that whenever you're a child, you don't necessarily look at race, I guess, is just one thing that's set apart that's different. You look at everything that's different. And I do remember being in elementary school and being the only African American student in my class. And our kindergarten teacher at the time actually gave us a lesson. It must have been Black History Month. She gave us a lesson about how things used to be. And it's funny now because things are still the same way. But she gave us a lesson about how things used to be. And I remember having a white friend who was a classmate who sat next to me. And when my teacher was telling us about slavery and everything that happened in the civil rights movement, she just like she wrapped her arm around me and she was just like, if we were living during that time, I would take you into school and I would paint you white so that nobody would hurt you. And I think that it was something that was just shocking for us as kindergartners. I don't remember much, but I remember that from being in kindergarten. But it was just shocking to us to just hear about the hatred from just someone being a different skin color. And for us, we had so many questions. I mean, we came in class, why is your hair different? Why do you say things this way? Back then, when I was a child, if you talked proper, you used proper English, then other people in your race would say, why are you talking white? You are talking white. And they wouldn't want to talk to you or be around you if you hung out with other white students more than you hung out with people of your own race or color.
But the problem with that is because you were the only Black person in that class, because I've been there, those organically, naturally become your friends because you see them
Right.
every single day.
Right.
And you work with them on projects and, they become your friends. And so it's this weird dynamic that you can't escape from, that people want to label you as being quote unquote an Oreo, but you didn't choose that.
Right.
You didn't choose that. You just chose to get up that morning and go to school, and they put you in that position where now your own race is picking on you
Yeah.
for being perceived as different.
Right. And it was interesting because I guess as I got older and progressed through elementary school, then I saw more students that were the same race that I am. And so that's when that kind of started happening. And another thing about it is just, I don't know, I guess I learned to love people of a different race early because my home life was not the best whenever I was a kid in elementary school. And we had something at the school called SNAP partners. And my SNAP partner that was assigned to me was one of my PE coaches, and she was white. And she would check on me all the time. She would make sure that I ate. And initially, I did not understand. Like, in my mind, even though I was fine with knowing people and being friends with people of the opposite race, I kind of felt offended, I guess, as a child. Like, why are you asking me all these questions about if I ate or not? Like, we eat at home. My parents or my grandparents take care of me. We don't have those issues. Like, are you just doing this because I'm Black and you think that I'm not being taken care of? But she would do the nicest thing. She'd have these big bags with candy in it or words of encouragement. And I'm friends with her to this day. I actually ended up working with her at one point. And she's always telling me about how I've grown in Christ and how she's glad that we connected through that experience. And even then, it was just interesting to other Black students because they're like, why is this white lady talking to you all the time? Why is she buying you candy? Why is she just always hanging around you? And I think that, not really a sad thing, but just getting older, we kind of did start fading off into separate groups, like throughout high school, and then even church became a big thing. I will say one thing that happened recently, actually, in one of my classes, one of my students came up to me and she was just like, "Oh my gosh, I have to tell you what happened. Something so weird happened." And there were other students that were around, and we're all looking at her like, "Okay, what happened? That was so weird." And she said, "Well, we were at church, and these white people came to our church. And I don't know why they came in there. They were not supposed to be there." And so some of the other kids were just confused about why she thought that was so weird. And I asked her why she thought it was weird. She said, "I don't know why it's weird, but they just weren't supposed to be there. They have their own church. Like, white people are Catholic." And one of the other black students is Catholic. And so she didn't understand why it was just so weird to her. And it just became, I couldn't say too much to her, but I just explained to her that it wasn't weird. It would have been great to have a conversation about it because I think that, I mean, church is the place where you're supposed to invite everybody in.
Exactly.
It's the place
God's
where
house.
people come to be loved, but yet there's these barriers and boundaries and walls because people are not the same skin color.
And that has been happening for years, because if you look on pretty much every corner, talk about segregation, we still have segregation in 2022 because there's a white church on this corner, and across the street or right next door to it, there's a black church, our church. I was a greeter, and Myra and I currently attend church together. But I was, years ago, when I was greeting, there I am at the front door, and this African-American couple comes in, and I'm like, "Good morning, welcome to, HFC. Here's your bulletin for the day." And they're like, "Oh, we're at the wrong church." And I go, "Why do you say that?" And they go, "Oh, trust me, we're at the wrong church." And I go, "But, it's God's house, so how can it be the wrong church?" And the lady leans over and whispers in my ear, "We were looking for the black church." And I go, "Oh, it's across the street. It's on the other side of the freeway." And they left. Now, that was, I don't know, we moved to Florida in 2011, so that was before 2011, but I'll never forget another Sunday when we were actually pastors of a church in Florida. Once again, I'm at the front door. Church has started, but I'm piddling, and this lady walks in, and she goes, "What's the name of this church?" And I told her the name of the church. She goes, "Oh, no, this isn't the church I was looking for." And I go, "Well, if you're looking for a church and you're here at church, maybe this is the church God wanted you to be at today." And I wish I would have said that to the couple that left, because maybe God had a word for them that could have come from a white pastor that would have spoken to their lives, this black couple. But now I had a do-over, got my mulligan. And so I told this lady, I'm like, "Hey, maybe God has a word for you here today. And so since you're already here, why leave? And, by the time you get to the church you're trying to get to, church may be over. Just come on in." And she happened to look over my shoulder, and we had a banner, and it was a picture of me and my husband at the time, our church picture or whatever. And she goes, "Are you the first lady?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Of this church?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "I think I'll stay." And I asked her later, and she said she had never encountered a first lady that was so nice and encouraging and welcoming, that normally they're standoffish, that she decided to see what was different about this church. And here's the thing, God should make us all different. And we should be so different that people want to know, well, what's so different about you and the God in you that I can find out to see how God is operating in your life. That's the kingdom way. Unfortunately, the culture way is, well, your church is across the street. The church you're looking for is across the street. Go around and we send people on their way.
Go where
instead
you belong.
Exactly. Instead of taking the time to say, "Here I am with open arms, like Christ is with open arms. Come here. Let me love you." As the word tells us, love thy neighbor as thyself. Let me love you and show you the love of Christ so that you can become a peculiar person too.
Oh, I'm peculiar. Well, that also reminds me of my husband and our kids were going to church that we had been, told about, and we were passing the church that we've gone to now for, gosh, 25, 26 years. And we were listening to the radio, and it happened to be the pastor of HFC. And we were like, oh, there's the church of the guy on the radio, and we like him. We like to listen to him. We should check that out. So the church that we ended up going to that Sunday was not, it didn't make me feel like, okay, God's here. It made me feel like, oh, people that are trying to be God are leading this church,
Wow.
which is a way different feeling.
Yes.
So, and I was like, if that man comes over here and touches me, I'm going to slug him. Because I really think he's an agent of Satan,
Okay,
not
Peter.
God.
And that's why I love her.
Well, it was like, don't touch me or my kids. You're going to fall on the floor, and it's not going to be slain in the spirit. It's going to be smacked by me. Anyway, so the next week we did go to the church with the pastor on the radio and the pastor's wife, the first lady, which we don't call, it's the pastor's wife.
Yep.
And after I got to know her, that was a very uncomfortable position for her because she's an introvert. She'll do her job or whatever that she's doing, but she doesn't want to be out front and center. But she welcomed us. She told us where the kids were going to go. And, my kids were mad because we'd gone to so many churches trying to find the right place. And they were stomping down the hall, especially my daughter, mad. Why do I have to go to the Sunday school? Can't we just go to, the church service and see if we like it? And I said, I'm going to Sunday school, and I'm a little nervous about it. I said, but it'll be fine. So after church, the same daughter, who's a lot like her mother, comes out, can I go downtown with the youth group and feed the homeless? And she's just bubbly, and I'm like, okay, what happened? But the next week we went back, and the pastor's wife was like, oh, Boyd and Myra, it's so nice to see you. And I'm like, okay, you could have knocked me over with a feather.
She remembered your name.
She remembered us, and she was like, I'm so glad you came back. And, I heard all the kids just fell in love with your kids. And, so I'm like, okay, they were talking about us. That's kind of different. But anyway, we meshed. And it wasn't a human connection thing. I think it was a God connection from the beginning. It was like, this is where you need to go. Go check out the scary church, and then next week you can come here. And don't be fooled by people putting on God clothes, but not representing God. And there's a big difference because, there was a time that I dressed up to go to church because that's what I was supposed to do. And it wasn't for recognition of God. There are a lot of people. This reminds me. I'm going to slide off here because that's in my genes. I'm branching out.
Go ahead.
That I do not like the saying that, oh, God has really blessed me by clothes or cars or homes or whatever. I think that comes from hard work here on earth, knowing the right people at the right time, getting these opportunities, because there are people who live in extreme poverty that have just as much blessing. And they normally, in my opinion, can spread the gospel even stronger because that's what they live on. They don't live on material wealth. And, It's just like, don't say that. You're fortunate to have all that stuff. But that doesn't mean that people that don't have all this material
Aren't blessed.
aren't
Right.
blessed.
Right.
So anyway, next.
I
I can get on a roll.
I had a lot of thoughts while you were talking, Myra. I like whenever you brought up the fact that you guys went to church and you felt like God was not there. And that's what you actually went into church desiring and
Right.
looking for. And I think that people sometimes go into church looking for themselves and looking for people that look like them and have gone through the same things that they've gone through. And I think that, if you're going to sit with people that look like you and are going through the same thing that you're going through, are you really changing?
Right.
You're just trying to match up with other people. And how is it that we're looking for people that look like us and go through what we go through, but we're not looking for God? And I guess you can just go deeper into that. People look for churches that look nice and that sound nice, and
That
once
make
again,
them
still
feel good about
right.
themselves.
We're not looking for God. And it just makes me wonder, like, what are we doing? Are we really doing this right in church? We have all of I think because of the separation of race in the church, we have different traditions. And some of us can't even see the fact that some of those traditions are the same because we are blinded by the color of our skin. I think that I've seen a few videos in the past where there's a pastor up preaching and they're literally teaching about how we should not congregate or we should not, I won't say love. It was contradictory what he was saying because we should love everyone. That's what God tells us to do. But you should not fall in love with someone that is not the same race as you. And then use the word and say, if you do that, you are unequally yoked because your skin color is not the same as the person that you've fallen in love with. And I feel like, God made us all different skin colors. He gave us all different personalities. He gave us all different hairstyles and hair textures. He made us different. And if the second commandment is for us to love one another, how is it that it's so difficult? And I guess it's pretty much like we're putting a face on love, and putting a label on love when the Bible also says that God is love. There's no division in God. And it's like we're preaching and teaching everything that the Bible says, but we're not carrying it out. We're using the Bible to, I guess it's like we're using the word kind of as an excuse to live the way that we live.
Justification.
Yeah, we're trying to justify the way that we feel, but it's still not right. And I think that, unfortunately, well, it's weird because the Bible says that we should walk by faith and not by sight. So we shouldn't be seeing colors and it affect us. You look like you want to say something.
We talked about this in the car. We talked about when you say seeing colors, God tells us that we're not to try to create him. Because if we try to create what God looks like, we're using our finite mind to ascribe to an infinite God. And if the Bible tells us to walk by faith and not by sight, so we don't know what God looks like. God could look like you, he could look like me, he could look like whomever. So we should have that same level of faith that I can love you regardless of what you look like, because I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing your characteristics. I'm seeing whether you act with integrity. I'm seeing whether I can trust your word, because if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. Because guess what? Those are attributes of God that I know. I know the characteristics of God. I know the attributes of God. I know what the word tells me that God is going to do. And because I know that, when I see those things in operation in you, then it makes it easier to love you. I love you because you're inhuman. You're a human that, have come into my presence, and we work together, or whatever the case may be. But it makes it deeper, which is the way our relationship is supposed to be with God. As we learn more about God and we learn more of his attributes of God, we love him more, because again, it doesn't come to his blessings, but God, even despite this thing, you still love me. God, even despite when I fell short, you picked me back up, or you sent someone to help me in my shortcomings, that I may be an overcomer. And those things is what I love. And when we love those things about God, then it's easy to love those things when we see them in people. Mar, I love you because you gave my child his first haircut, but you did
So
it,
sweet.
you did it because, you were like, I'll do it. I said I needed it. I wasn't asking, but you volunteered. And you've always been that person. You've constantly shown up when I wasn't even looking or I didn't realize I needed assistance. I didn't realize I needed help, and you were there for me. Treve, you constantly have shown me what trust looks like, because you weren't very trusting when we first met. You had a lot of walls, and rightfully so, because of things that have happened in your life. But as those walls came down, I saw that because I was faithful to answer when you called, because I was faithful to encourage you when you needed encouragement, you started to trust that I was who I presented myself to be. If we can trust God for who he's presented himself to be, and then we emulate that, then I think the world becomes a more trustworthy place, because we're living out what God has said in his word. And so often people want to pretend they're living out God's word when, like you said, Myra, they're just dressed up
It's a costume.
and they're in that costume and they're feeling like, edify me instead of edify God.
Well, I think it's crazy to me, the world that we live in, while the walk that we walk, and while calling ourselves Christians, without loving people because of how they look. And I mean, that goes beyond race. There's so many other reasons why we choose not to love people. It's almost like it's almost like we're saying it's beneath me to even approach you because you don't look like me. What could we possibly have in common? The first thing we have in common is a creator, is a father who loves each and every one of us. It's almost like we're saying that skin color is sin. We don't want to interact with it. We don't want to bond with it. We don't want to even go through a process of trying to love it. I think that one of the hardest things for me has been, like she said, I did have a lot of walls up. One of the hardest things for me has been to be myself and fully love people, but at the same time understand that I may not get that love back because there are people that have walls up and people that see color and people that or people that are attracted to things that are similar to them, to people that are similar to them, to people that they feel like they have more in common with. I think that it's interesting that this is something that has happened for years and years and years and years.
And I think in 20 years from now, somebody's going to be having this same
Right.
conversation.
And
I
that's
hope not.
sad. There have
I
been
hope not, too.
wars and massive killings because of how people look.
Differences.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is crazy. Where people fight and kill each other over land and over power, but people have fought and killed people over the way that they look.
And their belief system, their version of God could be so different from someone else's that you're persecuted to the point of death. And so you were talking about unequally yoked. That's not biblical. That is not what it was talking about. It's
Right.
belief.
Right.
Like if a Christian marries an atheist, you are unequally yoked.
Right.
And you're not able to carry each other's burdens to lighten the load. You're just dumping more weight in their backpack. It's like not only are you going to carry your own burden, you're going to carry mine too, because now we're together. And that's not humanly possible. Only God can lift the burdens and give you insight and a heart to help someone else carry theirs. That strength does not come from us. And, it's just so, it's hard because I think, talking about people looking for the same, we should be looking for something totally different.
Right.
Because we were all made in God's image, which we were talking about. So he has every attribute, everything that each one of us has in our deepest soul is living in there because it's part of God. And we all share humanity, therefore we all share sin until we're dead and completely redeemed. I mean, yes, Jesus died for us so that every time we make a mistake, whether it's on purpose sometimes, which, we all do that. It's like, well, I just don't feel like being nice to her today because she really irritates me. And, 6 months ago, she said one word that hacked me off, so I'm done with you for a while. I'm going to punish you, which that's not our job either. But opening ourselves up to different really pulls us closer to God because you have to overcome self. You have to overcome barriers. I was thinking about the seeing part of us. Think about a blind person. Even, like to touch something, to feel it, to imagine in your mind that look. Color doesn't enter into that.
Right.
It's the person. If you're listening to something, and had I not stated that I'm a crazy white woman, maybe no one would know. They would just think I was a hick from East Texas by this voice. I mean, but color doesn't come into it. Sort of
Right.
like, on The Voice, you're turned around away from that person and you're judging what you hear, not what
Amen.
you see. And it's shocking to those judges sometimes when they turn around and see this, 5'1" little tiny girl singing with this large woman of color voice. And it's like, oh my gosh. Which, if I could change something about myself, I would be that kind of voice. Like, you didn't give me a good singing voice for a soloist because you knew I wouldn't be able to handle it. It'd be too much pride or, So I just think that, yes, we see color,
Yes.
but you have to see beyond it into the
Right.
person. We're all different.
Right.
And maybe the fact that in the beginning there was so much geographical space in between everybody, that it did isolate you to people that were just like you. And as the world has grown and, technology and all this other stuff has come into play, we are forced to be around people who are very different when that may or may not be your choice. I personally love to travel other places and see other cultures, and I don't want to look like the tourist. I usually try to, figure out, okay, what are people wearing there? I don't want to be like, ugh, those people from America, they come here and like, where's McDonald's?
Yeah.
Shut up, we don't eat McDonald's. Go home. But, and here we do have the freedom, or we did. It seems like it's infiltrating our society even more, where it's like, well, I'm just going to come and kill you because you said something about God that I don't agree with. And it's like, I'm sure God just weeps over that.
Well, I don't want to start weeping, so let's just say that this is a good point to say.
No, not yet.
No, not yet.
No.
Oh, hit it,
tell
Trevay.
her.
She's like, I got
We're
something
having
to
a
say.
good conversation. Something that I thought about. I was gonna give a testimony, but I didn't want to start crying.
Well, go ahead. See,
Go
I
ahead.
said we weren't going to weep, but go ahead and
I will say
weep.
this though. Something that I thought about was the fact that God made a promise to his people, and the symbol that represented that promise has very many different colors. And I also think, I think that's just incredible. And I think that says a lot. It's a rainbow. That is a symbol of his promise. And I think that it's also interesting, and now, just in this moment, astounding to me that you can mix some of those colors to make other colors. You can mix two colors to make one color that's very different from those two colors individually. I think that even what you were saying about The Voice and them not knowing what people look like until they turn their chairs around, I think that God does that on purpose. And I'll just go ahead and say my testimony. So this week, one day this week was challenging for just a moment for me. And it was just a moment because God reminded me very quickly. But when people, I'm a very petite, small black woman who does not look her age. And when people look at me, they think that I'm 17 or I'm 12 or whatever age.
You're in the 15th grade.
That's not right. Whatever age, that's not my age. And, I just got this position as an assistant principal. And of course, there are several older people who I am over. I won't even say that I'm over. I'm their evaluator. I am their leader. And I mean, that's one thing that people could be upset about is I'm older than you, so what could you possibly teach me? But another thing about that is because I look a certain way, automatically in people's minds, like, is she going to be able to do this job? Because she does not look like she knows much. She does not look like she can handle kids. And it's like, we're all grown, we're all adults. And so we're very well aware that we have to have the experience and the education to be in the position that I'm in. But it's like my resume doesn't even matter. My experience doesn't even matter because of how I look. And I think that, so God cleared that up for me. But I did question at one point, like, God, you made me look this way and you gave me this position. So why, and then I had to think, well, obviously there's some reason. And this could be the very reason, because people need to get out of what they see and have a conversation, which I had a couple of conversations with people. And there was another lady that I was in the library and she walked in the library and we hadn't really talked beyond just saying good morning and speaking because there's so many people and there's so many things I've had to do and to learn. But she walked in and she just said, you know, you're my favorite principal. That's my favorite principal over there because you look so young and you're beautiful.
Aw.
And I
And
was
you
just
are.
like, wow. But it made me, it reminded me, this conversation reminded me of that. And it made me just think about how this is the reason why he put me in this position. And he made me look the way that I look so people can stop looking at what they see on the surface and go deeper
Amen.
into who a person is, what their personality is, how they can help them. Because I can help. I'm not going to say things that I shouldn't say, but I'm here to help essentially. And it's true that you should not burn bridges. One thing that people always tend to say is that they have a circle of people, a circle of friends that they hang around or they only talk to or that they trust. And I always counter that with I don't have a circle of friends. I'm trying to build a network of people that I know and people that I can use as resources. Something that's very important that changed my perspective and changed the way that I think about things is when I was actually in school before becoming an assistant principal. There was a class called Human Resources, and as a teacher taking these classes, I'm thinking of human resources as I'm about to learn this department, the Department of Human Resources, and what they do and how a principal needs to know this information and use it. But what they taught us was that human resources are the people that are in your building that you work with, that you lean on, that you depend on, that you have to build a relationship with, build rapport with, and learn to trust, be open with, be truthful and honest with. And it completely just changed my mind, my perspective, the way that I view people, the way that I communicate with people. And it charged me to not see things from the surface level myself, but to dig deep into a person. And I think that is it wasn't a difficult lesson. It was an eye-opening lesson that I learned. And my prayer is that God can, or He will, I know that He can. My prayer is that He will extend that lesson to all of us when it comes to race and color.
Amen.
Amen. I have a question.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
now that you became friends with this lady that's still in your life, did you, your coach, I believe you said it was, did you ever, as an adult, tell her what your thoughts were when she was giving you all these things and ask you if you had eaten and all that kind of stuff? Did you ask her or tell her the questions that made you have in your mind, like why does she think I don't eat, or you know?
Um, I haven't had that conversation with her. That would be an interesting conversation to have. I haven't, and I think I haven't because I realize now, I don't know, like a lot of things happen as a child that we don't really know what's going on. We think that we're okay and we're fine, but we don't know. And there was a reason why I was on the list to need a SNAP partner. And as an adult, I realized that when I was a child, things were not good.
Right.
Things were not all well.
But they felt normal to you because
Right,
you didn't know any different.
right. And so now that I know, I think I actually just have learned to appreciate her more. That I can say that she saw past my skin color. I don't know if she got to choose the person or if they assigned me to her, but she didn't look at that. She just saw me as a student that needed help.
Well, and that had a lot of potential
Right,
to grow with a little extra help, maybe.
right. And the other day I was actually thinking about this because I was trying to remember what SNAP stands for. And I know because it's SNAPP and students needing, I know push is somewhere in there. But I think that in my mind, when I was trying to figure it out, it's like, okay, students needing a push and a partner, students needing a push and a prayer, students needing a partner in prayer. I was trying to come up with all of these things, but she really was all of those
Perspective.
things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And she was all of those things to me. So
I have to share this story, and because I want to get both of y'all's thoughts on this. So, when my oldest daughter was in elementary school, fourth grade, she had a teacher that was a woman of color. And during Black History Month, my little lily white, blonde haired, blue eyed kid was a minority at the school that she attended, which I didn't think anything about it. It's like school is school, go to school, get on the bus. Excuse me. And she asked, in a child's mind, why do we celebrate Black History Month? And the teacher said, what do you mean? It's about white history all the other months of the year. Well, number one, it embarrassed her in front of her peers. It made her feel stupid. And she came home crying, saying, Miss So-and-so, like, answered me this way, and I don't know what I did wrong. I just asked a question. So, as a mom, my claws came out, and I went and had a conference with the teacher, and she didn't defend herself, but she didn't apologize either. And what I told her is, you are a huge influence on all the children in your class.
right.
And you now have told my daughter inadvertently that her questions are stupid, so she should not ever ask another teacher any question because she's going to be made to feel embarrassed in front of the rest of the class. And the reason I reacted so strongly to that particular thing is I had a mean second grade teacher who happened to be white. And believe it or not, we were talking about this in the car. I was very timid and very shy and very sensitive when I was a small child. And I would know the answer to the question. And I would be saying it in my mind and like, just say it, just say it, just say it. But because I was intimidated, I wouldn't. And the teacher made the remark one day because I would just freeze. If she had come over and put her arm around me and said, I know you know the answer to this, Myra. Tell me in my ear if you're embarrassed. That would have built confidence in me, like, oh, I was right. I knew I was right. But instead, she said, I figured, and then called on the next, which now probably would be a lawsuit.
Yeah, it would.
Which, I think that's a whole nother conversation about extremes. But anybody, it doesn't matter if it's a teacher or somebody that you're sitting next to on a train or a bus or a plane, your words can either build up or destroy. And it takes years and a really good therapist sometimes, thank you, Rose, to work through and figure out like what you think is normal in your own mind was fashioned that way by words and actions of other human beings. Because even though as a Christian, you belong, you're loved by God, the most important opinion of you. It's like, I made you. Of course I love you. Of course I think you're beautiful.
You're a masterpiece.
You're a masterpiece. Right. I knew you before you were formed. But then people come and destroy the innocence and steal it from you and dump all their own insecurities on you. So people that say, oh, it's okay if I say this. God understands. Really? Now you're speaking for God?
Yeah, you're just justifying your poor behavior.
Yes. Very well said.
Right.
Which, I've done that to myself repeatedly, thinking, oh, well, I'm going to show him I'm whatever. And you're just showing ignorance,
Right.
So, anyway, that's it.
You talked in the car, we were talking about, people that believe differently from us. And how do you see past that? Because immediately when you see a woman and she has a scarf over her head and she's olive color, you automatically assume she's a Muslim or she's Islamic. And you mentioned being on a plane or a bus. On a plane, flying to New Jersey, sitting next to me was a lady who had a scarf on her head, and she was olive colored. And what I saw told me that she thinks differently from me. She's Muslim. I'm Christian. We're sitting right by each other. And we're both on our phones and we're playing, you're on a plane and now you're able to use your phone. And we're both playing Words with Friends. And I go, hey, girl, look at you. That was a good word. I go, look. And I showed her my highest word. And she's like, oh, my gosh. She goes, this is my highest word. And so now we have commonality. What we had in common was that we both like Words with Friends. Our faith was totally different. She didn't know that I was a Christian, but I knew that she was Muslim. And throughout the plane ride, we sat there, and so we started playing against one another. And then later, when I was at my hotel, I got a friend request from her. Oh. She found me on Facebook and sent me a friend request. We're still Facebook friends. She lives over in the Middle East. She was here for business, and we still keep in touch. She still celebrates her holidays and posts them on Facebook. I still celebrate my holidays and post them on Facebook. When I post a cute picture with me with my hat on and my sunglasses, my girlfriend says, you looking good. When she posts a picture of herself with her family and she's dressed nicely in one of her traditional garments, I'm like, oh, you work in that blue, girl. That's my signature color. I encourage her. We see past the fact that at our core, we may have different beliefs, but at our essence, we're both human. And that was, oh my gosh, that was in 2015.
Wow.
7 years. And so seeing past the differences to see what's common is sometimes the hardest thing to do. But when you do it, I really think God is glorified in that because he's getting the glory that I can love her despite what she believes. She loves me despite what I believe. And whatever she posts, if she posts something that may be different, that's her page. She has her freedom of speech. And when I'm blowing it up at Christmas, Easter, and whatever, to God be the glory. But we're still respectful of one another. And I think that's where we have a problem in society today is we've lost respect for people that may look different, that may believe different, that may dress different. There's no respect there. And then some people will say, well, respect is earned. You have to earn my respect. Okay, I'll give you that. That's your point of view. But let's just get back to the core of things. We're human. As you said in the car, when I cut my finger, I bleed red. When you cut your finger, you bleed red. Where's the difference?
Wow.
Think how boring it would be if we were all exactly the same.
Yeah.
This is
And like,
true.
who gets to pick the personality we're all stuck with?
Oof. No.
I'd
that
probably
would-
get an engineer. Boring. No, I'm kidding.
Well, now is this a good place for us to
I
start?
guess.
Amen. I mean, stop. We've already started. We're going to stop here, and
There's so much more to say.
we'll get to it. But I need a sweet tea break. I want to wet my whistle. So with that, thank you for joining and listening to us today. We hope you've enjoyed this message, and if you have, let us know. Send us a comment, write a text, share with us your thoughts about what we discussed today regarding race and God. If you're inspired by the word, share it with your family and your friends and even your enemies. And if you would like to make Jesus your Lord and Savior, or if you're just wanting prayer, you can reach out to us at wisewomenhtx@outlook.com. We want to thank everyone for listening in today, and please join us next time on Wise Women.